On November 25, 1990, a massive section of Interstate 90 in Washington state buckled, snapped, and disappeared into a lake on live television. Residents watching from the shoreline reported a terrifying spectacle. They described the terrible roar of grinding materials, followed by a thick white cloud of pulverized concrete spraying over the turbulent water. This was 6,600 feet of reinforced highway, a central artery for over half a century, transforming into a 100,000-ton anchor. How does a massive concrete bridge suddenly turn into a submarine? To understand why this structure failed so violently, we have to look back at the specific engineering choices required to bridge this water in the first place. Back in the late 19th century, Seattle was growing rapidly. Gold rush prospectors and the timber trade were packing the streets, turning a frontier outpost into a booming commercial hub almost overnight. But that growth hit a massive, watery wall to the east, Lake Washington. This huge body of water sat directly between Seattle and the expanding farming and logging communities, creating a severe bottleneck for anyone trying to cross. Glaciers had carved Lake Washington deceptively deep. The water drops roughly 200 feet, and the bottom is lined with another 100 feet of soft, unstable clay. Building support piers to reach solid bedrock would have been prohibitively expensive. In 1921, an engineer named Homer Hadley proposed an alternative. Instead of going down to the bedrock, he suggested floating the paved highway directly on top of the water using massive, hollow concrete pontoons. Solving this geological trap meant urban planners had to stop thinking about a highway as a rigid strip of land. They had to treat this bridge as a stationary boat. Jump ahead to 1989. The bridge had done its job for decades, but modern traffic volumes required a major renovation. The state closed the original span to upgrade it, handing the contract to a highly reputable construction team. The primary method chosen to strip away the old road deck was hydrodemolition, blasting the surface concrete apart using incredibly high-pressure water jets. This created an immediate environmental problem. The blasting process generated thousands of gallons of contaminated wastewater, and regulations strictly forbade dumping it into the pristine waters of the lake. Contractors solved the disposal problem by using the hollow pontoon chambers as temporary storage tanks, displacing the critical internal airstays keeping the structure afloat. To increase capacity, they removed the watertight doors, allowing the wastewater to slosh freely across the entire structure. Finally, they cut equipment access holes directly into the concrete hole, right near the waterline, leaving the interior open to the elements. Through these three operational choices, the renovation team effectively stripped the bridge of its structural buoyancy. They took a vessel with carefully protected internal failsafes and turned it into an open, vulnerable hull. The trigger event arrived over Thanksgiving weekend in 1990. A massive storm system stalled over western Washington, unleashing days of relentless rain and flooding rivers across the entire state. By Saturday, nearly 3 inches of rain had fallen in Seattle alone. The lake swelled rapidly, and 35-mile-per-hour winds drove harsh waves directly against the compromised open highway sections. On-site engineers realized the bridge was sitting dangerously low in the water. The open hatches were allowing lake water to pour in, and the internal pumps were entirely overwhelmed by the volume. State project engineer Hino Kinoshita arrived Sunday morning to find the lake practically level with the road deck. He ventured inside for a final inspection amid explosive cracks and the horrific groans of the failing concrete. At exactly 9:25 a.m., the center pontoon, known as A5, completely lost its remaining buoyancy and broke apart. As it sank, it created a massive V-shaped depression that violently ripped adjacent sections away from their moorings, dragging them down in a slow-motion chain reaction. The storm merely exposed the vulnerability of a structure that had already been stripped of its safety margins during the renovation. The immediate fallout was chaotic, with the busy I-90 corridor severed and sinking debris snapping anchor cables on a neighboring span. An overwhelmed Governor Booth Gardner reportedly watched the crisis unfold and said, "My state is falling apart on me." The governor quickly appointed a blue ribbon panel to investigate the exact cause of the disaster. Their final report delivered a string of sharp indictments directed squarely at the project's management. The core finding was clear. The contractors treated the bridge like a static stretch of pavement on solid ground, failing to apply the maritime construction practices required for a vessel sitting in deep water. The investigation emphasized that on a floating bridge, construction practices must be governed by a maritime mindset, prioritizing whatever keeps the structure afloat. The replacement bridge opened in 1993, built with an intense focus on durability. Engineers used a high-performance 10,000 psi concrete mixture, a significant leap in strength over the original 1940 materials. Today, the modern I-90 corridor successfully carries hundreds of thousands of vehicles across Lake Washington, but the 1990 disaster remains a permanent reminder in Seattle. No matter how massive human infrastructure appears, it is always subject to the laws of the environment it occupies.